Antikythera. Decades ago, beneath the churning waves of the Aegean Sea, desperate divers stumbled upon a sunken graveyard. A hidden fortune emerged from the freezing ocean floor, encrusted, silent, and beautifully preserved in ancient bronze. It looked like a completely standard maritime shipwreck. It held glorious treasures fitting perfectly into our accepted history books. When the recovery began, researchers expected to catalogue typical classical statues moving predictably through known historical timelines. What they pulled from the water instead shattered our entire understanding of human progress. What exactly was this impossible device? The answer changes everything we thought we knew. If you find yourself captivated by these lost chapters of human history, please take a moment to leave a like and subscribe to Echo Mysteries. Your support is the single spark. It gives us the resources and motivation to dive even deeper into hidden archaeology and the ancient secrets left behind. Share this discovery with a fellow seeker of truth, and let us know in the comments, what do you think? Let's unravel the past together. Spring 1900. A violent storm forces a crew of Greek sponge divers to seek shelter near the barren, rocky shores of Antikythera. When the waters finally calm, they descend into the deep. At first glance, what they find in the gloom is pure nightmare fuel, piles of what look like rotting corpses, scattered across the seabed. But as their eyes adjust, the horrific illusion fades. These are not bodies. They are magnificent, decaying bronze and marble statues. A sunken Roman vessel, carrying the looted pride of Hellenistic Greece. For months, they haul this breathtaking fortune to the surface. It is a monumental discovery, but the real treasure goes entirely unnoticed. Among the spectacular sculptures is an unremarkable lump of calcified green rock. It looks like debris. It is shipped back to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens and unceremoniously dumped in a courtyard. It sits there, ignored, battered by the elements for months, until one day in 1901, the stone mysteriously cracks open. The museum's staff brush away the corrosive dust to reveal something impossible. Embedded within the ancient rock are gears. Precision-cut teeth of interlocking bronze gears. This stopped the experts cold, a moment that changed history forever. Gears of this complexity do not belong in antiquity. They belong in the Renaissance. They belong in the era of European clockmakers, not alongside ancient philosophers. But here's where the story deepens. This encrusted mechanism was an incomprehensible anomaly. For decades, it defied every logical explanation. It wasn't until modern imaging technology peered inside that the terrifying genius of our ancient Greek ancestors was truly unveiled. Detailed in the journal Nature in 2006, and further decoded in recent years. The truth is staggering. This is humanity's first known analog computer, built somewhere between 100 and 200 BC. It contains a brilliant system of at least 37 meticulously calibrated bronze gears. It is not a mere toy. It is not a simple calendar. It is a cosmic simulator. By turning a hand crank on its side, the user could accurately track the cyclical movements of the sun and the moon. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses with cataclysmic precision. It even tracked the 4-year schedule of the ancient Olympic Games. Think about the sheer intellectual obliteration this represents. The mathematics required to design this, the metallurgy needed to cast it, the micro-engineering demanded to assemble it. None of this should exist in the classical world. It rewrites the timeline of human capability. We are taught a linear progression of technology, a slow, agonizing crawl from primitive tools to the modern era. Yet this solitary device proves that advanced mechanical engineering was already perfected before the dawn of the current calendar. So what happened to the brilliant minds that forged it? The knowledge to build something this sophisticated vanished completely into the dark, erased by time and tide. It would take humanity another 1500 years just to reinvent the exact same level of mechanical precision. Phaistos. Crete. In the scorching summer of 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia was digging through the apocalyptic ruins of a fallen empire. He was excavating the Minoan Palace complex. It was a once mighty administrative hub of early Greek civilization. It had been completely consumed by fire and structural collapse. Pernia was working meticulously in the subterranean archives, beneath heavy layers of crushed stone, blackened soil, and hardened ash. His trowel scraped against something anomalous, something completely out of place amid the typical pottery shards. It was a golden brown disk of fired clay. It was roughly 6 inches in diameter. It was incredibly thin. It was not a weapon of war. It was not a grand, imposing statue of a forgotten deity. It looked almost entirely mundane, but as Pernia carefully brushed the ancient dirt from its surface, a dizzying spiral of intricate pictograms emerged. They ran outward from the center on both sides. They were tightly packed. They were perfectly aligned. There are exactly 242 tokens impressed upon the disc. They depict human figures with feathered headdresses. They show shields, tools, animals, and strange architectural structures. The Minoan civilization was already famous for its advanced written languages, but these specific symbols matched absolutely nothing found before or since in the entire Mediterranean basin. They were a complete linguistic ghost, an isolated alphabet, but none of that is the deepest mystery here. The true impossibility lies in the physical mechanics of how these symbols were actually created. When modern researchers at the Heraclean Archaeological Museum examined the artifact under intense magnification, they noticed a stunning uniformity. The characters were not drawn by hand. They were not painstakingly etched or carved into the wet clay with a pointed stylus. They were stamped. Every single crest, every flying bird, every running man was forcefully pressed into the material using a pre-formed matrix. Someone had deliberately crafted a set of customized, reusable metal or stone punches. They created one specific punch for each distinct symbol. This is the fundamental, world-changing concept of movable type printing. And here is where the Phaistos disk becomes a massive problem for orthodox timelines. The disk is securely dated by its surrounding ash layers to 1700 BC. That places this singular artifact an incomprehensible 3,000 years before Johannes Gutenberg supposedly revolutionized the world with the printing press in Europe. The ancient Greeks inhabiting the island of Crete possessed the exact mechanical philosophy of mass text reproduction. How did they get this idea? The conceptual leap required to separate a continuous language into individual, reusable stamps is a hallmark of industrial age thinking. It requires a complex society looking to standardize and distribute information on a massive, unprecedented scale. Yet, this magnificent technological leap appears nowhere else in the known archaeological record. It is an orphaned technology, an isolated spark of industrial brilliance that was violently extinguished, erased by whatever cataclysm wiped the Minoan palaces. The text itself remains completely undeciphered to this day. It is a silent, encrypted message from a highly advanced society, a society that apparently possessed the conceptual tools for mass communication but left us only a single prototype. It sits today under climate-controlled glass in Crete, a perfectly preserved anomaly proving that our ancient ancestors were holding the keys to the modern world millennia before we were ever ready for them. Baghdad, Iraq. In 1936, the Earth yielded a secret that defies all conventional logic. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig was sorting through artifacts excavated from Kajut Rabu. He found a collection of small, yellowish clay jars. They were dated somewhere between 250 BC and 224 AD. On the outside, they looked completely ordinary, just standard, utilitarian terracotta pots measuring about 5 inches tall. But what lay hidden inside these unassuming vessels stopped researchers cold. This was not decorative pottery. It was not a simple vessel for holding grain or water. Peering into the neck of the jar, Koenig discovered a highly specific, engineered structural arrangement. A copper cylinder was carefully inserted into the clay body, running directly down the center of that copper tube was a single iron rod. The iron and the copper were deliberately separated. They were tightly held in place and perfectly isolated from one another by a thick, molded plug of asphalt at the top. The iron rod showed intense, undeniable signs of heavy chemical corrosion. This specific configuration of isolated metals is not a random artistic choice. To anyone with a basic understanding of modern chemistry, this is a profoundly familiar schematic. Koenig immediately recognized it and proposed a wildly controversial theory. This was a galvanic cell. It was an ancient battery. When we think of electrical power in the ancient world, we instinctively picture the mythological, sky-splitting thunderbolts hurled by Zeus from the peak of Mount Olympus. We consider it purely a metaphor for divine, uncontrollable wrath. Yet, this small jar suggests that humanity might have been physically harnessing a fraction of that exact same elemental energy down on Earth. If Koenig was right, it meant ancient people understood chemical electricity thousands of years before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery. Proponents of the high-technology theory argue that by filling the jar with a mild, naturally available electrolyte solution like fermented grape juice or acidic vinegar, a chemical reaction would violently occur between the copper and the iron, generating a flow of electricity. They theorized this generated electricity could have been used for complex electroplating, fusing microscopic layers of gold onto silver jewelry. You can actually verify this exact chemical principle yourself right now in your own home. Take a standard iron nail. Take a piece of bare, stripped copper wire. Take a fresh, highly acidic fruit like a lemon. Push both into the flesh. You must ensure that the two pieces of metal do not physically touch each other inside the fruit. Now, touch your tongue. Alternatively, connect them to a standard digital voltmeter. You will immediately feel a sharp, metallic tingle on your tongue. The meter will register a live, measurable electrical current. Modern laboratory tests on exact replicas of the Baghdad battery have proven this. Using simple vinegar as the electrolyte fluid, the ancient design successfully generates a continuous current of roughly 0.8 to 2 volts. But mainstream Middle Eastern archaeology fiercely rejects the battery hypothesis. The orthodox scientific consensus argues a far more mundane reality. Experts assert these jars were merely protective containers specifically designed to hold sacred religious scrolls or ancient papyrus documents. Over countless centuries, the organic parchment or papyrus completely rotted away inside the sealed jars, leaving behind an acidic residue. This slow, inevitable decay caused the severe chemical corrosion seen on the metal components. Were these simply ruined document vaults? Or were they silent, chemical power plants lost to time? Saqqara, Egypt. In 1898, excavators descended into a freshly unsealed tomb. In the sprawling Par-Da'iman necropolis, the air was thick with the dust of millennia as they uncovered ancient secrets. They were surrounded by the typical trappings of Egyptian burial rituals, amulets, pottery, and ceremonial carvings designed to guide the deceased into the afterlife. This era, around 200 BC, was a time of intense cultural exchange. It was the Hellenistic period, where the intellectual ambition of Ptolemaic Greece bled deeply into the ancient traditions of the Nile. Trade routes buzzed with not just spices, but profound ideas. Yet, amid the standard artifacts, archaeologists uncovered a small, wooden object that immediately defied simple categorization. It was roughly 7 inches long, carved from the sturdy wood of a local sycamore fig tree. At first glance, it was labeled merely as a child's toy or a generic religious icon. They called it the Saqqara bird. It was packed away in the cavernous archives of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and forgotten for decades. But when modern eyes finally re-examined this simple wooden carving, they noticed something impossible. It didn't look like a normal bird. The wings were entirely straight, possessing a distinct dihedral angle. The body was unnaturally aerodynamic, thick at the front and tapering smoothly to a point at the rear. Most alarmingly, the tail was strictly vertical, standing upright like the rudder of a modern airplane, rather than lying flat like the tail feathers of a living falcon. To believers in ancient high technology, this was not a toy. This was a scale model of a functional, wind-powered glider. They argued that the ancient Egyptians, perhaps collaborating with Greek engineers, had cracked the secret of mechanical flight thousands of years before the Wright brothers. They pointed to the sleek, purposeful design. It looked ready to catch an updraft over the pyramids. The sheer audacity of this claim captured the public imagination. Could humanity have been airborne before the birth of Christ? But here is where the story deepens. The romantic idea of ancient gliders shatters when subjected to the brutal, unforgiving laws of modern physics. In 2006, aviation experts decided to test the myth once and for all. They didn't rely on visual assumptions. They built an exact, perfectly scaled replica of the Saqqara bird. They placed it inside a state-of-the-art aerodynamic wind tunnel. They blasted it with controlled currents to measure its exact lift and drag coefficients. The results were conclusive and deeply disappointing for the ancient astronaut theorists. The wooden model completely lacked a crucial component for sustained flight, a horizontal tailplane. Without this stabilizing surface, the object was wildly erratic. It could not maintain a level pitch. If thrown, it would immediately nosedive violently into the ground. It was not a glider. It possessed absolutely zero aerodynamic stability. The vertical tail, while resembling a rudder, was merely an artistic representation of a bird's tail feathers, carved from a single piece of wood for structural simplicity rather than flight mechanics. The dream of Egyptian aviation evaporated in the wind tunnel. It remains a beautiful, stylized carving, a testament to ancient artistry, but not to forgotten aeronautics. Dendera, Egypt. Picture a map of ancient Egypt. Now travel deep into the heavy, suffocating darkness of the Hathor temple complex. You are moving through narrow, claustrophobic stone corridors. The air is completely still. It smells of ancient dust and cold granite. You are descending into the secret subterranean crypts beneath the main sanctuary. These rooms were never meant for public eyes. They were strictly reserved for the highest echelons of the priesthood. When early explorers finally breached these hidden chambers and held up their flickering torches, the dancing light revealed something deeply unsettling carved into the walls. It was a massive, intricately detailed bas-relief. It did not depict the usual procession of gods or standard agricultural offerings. It showed a bizarre, mechanical-looking scene that immediately sparked one of the most persistent technological controversies in Egyptology. The carving shows human figures standing next to a massive, elongated, transparent bulb. Inside this bulb, a long, wavy serpent extends across its entire length. The bulb itself is firmly supported by a thick, pillar-like object with horizontal ridges. At the base of the bulb, a distinct, braided cable connects the entire apparatus to a small, box-like structure. To the modern observer, the visual parallel is incredibly aggressive and difficult to ignore. This doesn't look like religious symbolism. It looks exactly like a technical schematic for a giant Crookes tube, an early form of the cathode ray tube used to generate light. The wavy snake perfectly mimics a glowing electrical filament. The thick pillar resembles a high-voltage insulator. The braided cord looks identical to a power cable. Proponents of ancient high technology look at this wall and see absolute proof. They argue this is the Dendera light, It is the smoking gun explaining how the Egyptians could paint the pitch-black interiors of deep tombs without leaving soot. They were using electric lighting. But here is where the story deepens. The entire visual interpretation changes drastically now. When you actually read the surrounding hieroglyphs instead of just looking at the pictures. Mainstream Egyptologists offer different translations. They state unequivocally that this is not a Crookes tube. The bulb is actually a stylized representation of Nut. The womb of Nut, the sky goddess, is often depicted as a protective enclosure. The insulator is a jade pillar, a very common symbol representing stability and the backbone of Osiris. The cable is simply a lotus flower's stem, from which the entire structure is emerging, and the filament snake is actually the deity Harsantus, born from a lotus. The scene does not represent the generation of electricity, it represents the creation of the universe and the sun. The soot-free ceilings, most likely achieved through a complex system of reflecting bronze mirrors bouncing sunlight deep into tombs. Or the use of clean-burning castor oil lamps. The Dendera light remains a spectacular optical illusion, a Rorschach test, where modern eyes superimpose modern technology onto ancient theology. Constantinople, Ottoman Empire. In 1929, theologians were cataloging archives. In the dusty archives of the Topkapi Palace, they were sorting through piles of forgotten manuscripts when they discovered parchment. Carefully unrolling the fragile gazelle skin, they found an astonishingly detailed world map signed by the legendary Piri Reis. The date inscribed on the map was 1513. This was merely 20 years after Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. Yet, this map showed the eastern coast of South America with a level of longitudinal precision that European navigators lacked. European navigators would not officially master this for another 2 centuries. It was a cartographic masterpiece of the era. It detailed the complex coastlines, the correct placement of islands, and even notes on local wildlife. But the true shock lay at the very bottom edge of the gazelle skin, below the recognized coastlines of South America. The map extended southward into uncharted territory. It clearly depicted a continuous, jagged coastline. To the sensationalists of the 20th century, this was the ultimate, irrefutable proof of a lost global civilization. They claimed this southern landmass was Antarctica, not just Antarctica, but Antarctica mapped before it was covered in ice. They argued that Piri Reis must have possessed ancient source maps drawn by a highly advanced, pre-glacial society. They pointed to the supposed subglacial topography, arguing the map matched modern seismic surveys of the bedrock. The implication was staggering. It suggested a forgotten golden age of human exploration, completely wiped from history. But none of that is the deepest mystery, because the real story isn't about an ancient, ice-free Antarctica. It is about how the human mind stubbornly forces evidence to fit a fantastic narrative. When serious academic cartographers meticulously analyzed the Piri Reis map, the high-technology illusion completely collapsed. The admiral himself explicitly stated in the margins that he did not survey these lands himself. He compiled his masterpiece from about 20 older source maps, including contemporary Portuguese charts and Columbus's maps. The mysterious southern coastline is not a subglacial survey of Antarctica. It is a known cartographic convention. Since the time of Ptolemy, scholars deeply believed in the concept of terra australis, a massive southern continent. They theorized that it had to exist purely to balance the weight of the known northern lands. Mapmakers of the 16th century routinely drew this imagined, hypothetical continent connecting to the bottom of South America. Furthermore, the Antarctic section of the Piri Reis map isn't icy. It features warm weather and mythical creatures. It is not a lost technological artifact. It is a beautiful, deeply flawed compilation of early exploration and hopeful guessing, and ancient Greek geographical philosophy. The map proves that humanity was desperately trying to understand the shape of the world. But they were doing it with ink, compasses, and imagination, not with forgotten satellite technology. Transvaal, South Africa. Deep underground, miners are blasting through massive layers of ancient pyrophyllite rock. They are digging in the sedimentary deposits. Near the small mining town of Ottosdal, the physical labor is brutal. The rock they are crushing is incredibly old. It was formed during the Precambrian period, but amidst the suffocating dust and shattered stone, the miners find something anomalous. They are pulling out small, exceptionally hard, metallic-looking spheres. They are roughly the size of cricket balls or smaller. They look meticulously manufactured. Some are solid bluish metal with white flecks. Others are hollow shells with spongy centers. But the most shocking feature is carved directly into their surface. Many of these spheres feature 3 perfectly parallel grooves running exactly around their equator. They look exactly like machined metal. They look like intelligent design. The implication is staggering. The rock encasing these spheres is definitively dated to 3 billion years old. 3 billion years. Let that sink in. At that point in Earth's history, the planet was a hostile, toxic wasteland. The atmosphere was largely unbreathable. The highest life was microscopic cyanobacteria slowly building slime mounds in shallow water. There were no dinosaurs. There were no trees, no humans. Yet, sitting in the callous palms of these miners were objects that looked forged in a modern foundry. Proponents seized them. They declared them the ultimate proof of a pre-human, highly advanced terrestrial civilization, or perhaps, discarded debris of extraterrestrial visitors who mined the Earth eons before we evolved. They argued that natural erosion could never produce such perfectly straight lines. They argued that nature does not manufacture metallic orbs with equatorial ridges. The spheres became legendary in alternative history circles. They were locked away in museum displays as the ultimate out-of-place artifacts. But here is where the story deepens. Because the Earth is far more creative and far more deceptive than we usually give it credit for. When actual geologists finally placed these spheres under the microscope, the alien foundry theory evaporated. According to a comprehensive 2006 report by geologist Bruce Cairncross, the truth is entirely terrestrial. These are not manufactured metal artifacts. They are naturally occurring geological formations known as concretions. They are composed primarily of the minerals pyrite and hematite. Millions of years ago, when the host rock was soft, mineral-rich water seeped through the sediment. These minerals began precipitating and crystallizing around a tiny central nucleus. They grew outward in perfect, concentric spherical layers. The surrounding mud eventually hardened into solid stone. So what about the impossible, perfectly machined parallel grooves? The geological explanation is incredibly elegant. As the concretions were growing in the ancient mud, the surrounding sediment was deposited in horizontal layers. These fine layers had slightly different porosities and chemical compositions. The growing sphere simply absorbed these subtle striations. The grooves are not carved lines. They are simply the fossilized fingerprints of the layered mud they grew inside. The Klerksdorp spheres are not a message from an alien race. They are a demonstration of deep time. Nature is perfectly capable of mimicking intelligent design with nothing more than mineral water, mud, and absolute patience. California, United States. In the winter of 1961, 3 rockhounds were scouring the arid landscape near Olancha. They were specifically hunting for geodes. They were looking for ancient, hollow rocks filled with beautiful, sparkling crystals. They collected several promising specimens and brought them back to their workshop. The next day, Wallace Lane started cutting. He placed a particularly heavy, encrusted nodule into his diamond-bladed rock saw, expecting to reveal a glittering interior. Instead, the saw blade screamed. It hit something impossibly hard, completely ruining a brand new cutting wheel. When he finally forced the stone open, he didn't find amethyst or quartz. He found a circular section of porcelain. Running straight through the center of that porcelain was a brilliant, uncorroded shaft of magnetic metal. The men were stunned. They had just cut open a geode, a geological formation that supposedly takes hundreds of thousands of years to develop. Yet, encased perfectly within the center of this ancient rock was a piece of undeniably modern, manufactured technology. It possessed a ceramic insulator. It had a copper ring. It had a metal core. It looked like an electrical component. The rock was quickly examined by a geologist who allegedly dated the outer crust to roughly 500,000 years old. The story exploded. It became known as the Koso artifact. For decades, it was held up as the Holy Grail, the ultimate, undeniable proof of a highly advanced, prehistoric civilization. They argued that 500,000 years ago, someone was driving combustion engines or building electrical grids in the California desert. It was a complete paradigm shift. It made the mechanical genius of the Antikythera mechanism look like child's play. But here is where the story deepens. Or rather, where the greatest illusion in modern archaeology violently shatters. Because the Koso artifact is the perfect example of why the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates warned us to question everything, especially our own assumptions. In 2004, the National Center for Science Education commissioned a brutal, uncompromising analysis of the artifact. Researchers tracked down X-ray images. They consulted with a specific, highly specialized group of experts, the spark plug collectors of America. The verdict was instantaneous. The mysterious porcelain core, the metal shaft, the copper ring, they weren't ancient technology, they were 1920s components. Specifically, they were the patented parts of a champion spark plug, used in Ford Model T engines in the desert. So how did a 1920s spark plug get trapped inside a 500,000-year-old rock? It didn't. The dating was wrong. The outer shell wasn't an ancient geode. It was a concretion of iron oxide. Under specific, highly alkaline conditions found in that specific desert, a rusting piece of iron can rapidly accrete surrounding sand, pebbles, and mud into a rock-hard shell in a matter of mere decades, not millennia. A miner dropped a spark plug in the mud in the 1920s. The desert swallowed it, rusted it, and baked it into a solid nodule. 40 years later, a rockhound cut it open and imagined an ancient empire. The Koso artifact isn't proof of ancient aliens. It is proof of the incredible speed of natural chemistry and the dangerous, intoxicating power of human confirmation bias. Across continents and millennia, we dig up objects that challenge everything. We oscillate violently between two extremes: the absolute, mathematical genius of the Antikythera mechanism, and the rusted, desperate deception of the Koso artifact. One proves our ancestors possessed staggering technological brilliance. The other exposes our boundless capacity for illusion. We desperately want to believe in forgotten empires. We project our modern obsessions into the deep past. The ancient Greeks taught that the highest human pursuit is the unflinching search for truth. Sometimes, that truth is pulled from the dark, churning waters of the Aegean Sea. It emerges intact, ready to shatter our accepted timelines. Other times, it is just modern debris buried in the desert dirt. History is never a neat, straight line. It is a fragmented, broken mirror. As we stand on the precipice of our own rapidly advancing future, looking back at these silent relics, we are left with one haunting thought. Are we actually uncovering the lost blueprints of a forgotten human epoch? Or are we simply staring into the abyss of time and hallucinating our own reflection?